Welcome back to Baithak. I do apologize for the long delay. I was actually on a short hiatus back home to Darjeeling, which I will be discussing further on in the episode. In cover today, we'll be discussing a very important news story that happened recently and a few other stories as well, which deserve your attention as well as mine. So let's cut right into it. The first news story that I want to discuss, of course, is the rape case that happened recently in Kolkata. It happened in RG Kar Hospital, and I'm sure most of my viewers and listeners already know the details of this case. There have been a lot that has been spoken on this regard, and I would not like to add too much into it. I would just like to mention that there has been a lot of misinformation that has been spread. Now, in particular about this case, now since it has garnered a lot of protests and it has garnered a lot of social media attention as well, while we are protesting this and while we are discussing these matters and putting up stories and discussing the issues and the various events that happened much after the case as well, let us keep an open mind. Let's keep and always keep an attentive mind to see that the information that we spread is true, that the information that we are spreading and discussing merits some evidence towards it as well. I know that's a very difficult thing to take, but we as people who are discussing these matters need to make sure that we adhere to the truth as much as possible, and that only further complicates things, and I feel like that would be a very good step to take. Now, moving on to the details of the case, there have been a lot of discussion that has already taken place, and I would not like to add too much into that. But I would like to mention a very particular solution that I feel garners a lot of attention and is actually the only true solution that we can take in matters to this case in particular, and a lot of other cases as well. Now, any crime that a criminal is trying to overtake, they always have this thought of what will happen if I get caught? What will happen if I get punished? What will happen if or when I get punished? Now, the first and foremost step that we need to take is, of course, turn that if into a when. The detectives, the judicial system has to be very efficient, has to be working tirelessly to make sure that all the criminals are arrested and properly punished. That way, we strike fear into the hearts of the criminals and make them second guess every time they think about taking a crime. Now, the second most important thing that we need to talk about, I feel, is the issue of a deterrent. I feel a deterrent is the most important and most effective way that we can counteract this problem and tackle this issue. Now, historically, the most severe crimes have always had the most severe punishments. If we see in history, in the Roman Empire, the most appalling crime was, of course, patricide, which means the killing of your own father to get his riches. So that crime was punished the most severely. Usually, what would happen is you would be tied into a sack with a snake, with an eagle, and with rats, and thrown into the river so that they would eat you alive. So basically, the point is that the punishment needs to be very severe and macabre and so fear inspiring that the criminal gets deterred from ever committing the crime. There have been a lot of other examples as well. And in particular, with rape, the Chinese, I believe, used to have this punishment known as Ling Shi. It's basically a death by 1,000 cuts. They used to make small incisions all over your body and cut you and bleed you out in a very slow and painful manner. And that created a lot of fear among the people to basically not commit the crime. Now, if a similar method could be applied, if a similar punishment or severe punishment could be applied, especially in the cases of rape and murder as well, then I feel that deterrent itself will solve a lot of issues. Now, of course, this is only a part of the problem, and there are a lot of other issues that need to be taken into consideration as well, but I feel this would be a very good step to take. The next topic that I would like to talk about is the fall of the recent Bangladeshi government. Sheikh Hasina had been a the principal supporter and the principal leader of the government for quite a long time, I believe from 1996 when she won her first election. And recently, the people had enough. The government hit a boiling point where Sheikh Hasina actually had to resign and flee the country. And currently, military rule is imposed with a temporary government in place. Now, to give you a short, brief overview of the situation, Sheikh Hasina actually had a very authoritarian government in place in Bangladesh, and she was actually criticized a lot for the way she was subduing revolts, how she was handling the country. Although there was a lot of good also taking place, Bangladesh was at one point of time the fastest growing economy in the world, but the situations and the circumstances in which she was leading this were very criticized and very iffy, to be honest with you. Now, to be specific, there was the case of the Bangladeshi revolts. The Bangladeshi rifles basically wanted more freedom and more exuberance and power over the country, and they were hosting a lot of revolts. And Sheikh Hasina actually was criticized a lot for the way she subdued. Almost 74 people were killed during the subdue of that revolt, and that was a big criticism against her. There was also a lot of allegations about vote rigging during her elections, and it is quite surprising to see how she won 4 to 5 back-to-back elections when she was such an unpopular person in the country. There was also the recent case of her elections where the opposition party actually boycotted the entire elections, and that's the reason why she won. And that was also a big talking point in the country. There was all, and the latest thing that actually tipped it over was that, so basically during the revolts and basically during the Bangladeshi war for freedom, all the freedom fighters and their descendants were actually offered a lot of quotas, they were offered a lot of sanctions, they were also offered a lot of reservations and such. And the rest of the people felt that was very unfair. And the way that the selection processes took place, so most of the people didn't even have any freedom fighters in their lineage, but were still availing the quotas and the reservations. And it was more or less a way to separate the classes. That was a big difference. And the latest revolts that took place actually led to her resignation. Now, the reason why I talk about this a lot is because, as you and me and a lot of us and a lot of our viewers have already noticed, Bangladeshi refugees which have been pouring into the country have been creating a lot of tension and creating a lot of issues in our area, especially in the North Bengal region. Now, the Mizoram Chief Minister has openly said to Prime Minister Modi that he will not allow any Bangladeshi refugees to enter the state. A similar declaration was made by the Northeast Council, where they were very adamant in refusing entry of Bangladeshi refugees into their country because Bangladeshi refugees are known to be very criminal in nature. Now, I'm not pointing figures at anyone. I'm not saying that all of them are evil people trying to destroy our country, but the facts speak a story, and that is what I'm pointing towards and shedding light. And you and I may have noticed that Siliguri itself has become very crime ridden in the past few years, and a lot of this can be pointed towards the Bangladeshi refugees which have been coming in and pouring in. In accordance with the previous story that we spoke about, there was a recent rape case that happened in Siliguri as well of a young Nepali schoolgirl. And in further investigations, it was noticed that the person who committed the crime was a Bangladeshi refugee who didn't even have Indian citizenship and was actually living illegally in the country. You can, if you're a citizen of Siliguri and its neighboring areas, you might have noticed the large influx of slums, large increase in slum areas in the area, and subsequent increase in crime in the area as well. Recently, my own house in Siliguri was broken into and stolen, and this is not a very uncommon case. There have been a lot of theft, a lot of robbery which has been taking place. There has been a subsequent increase in rape and murder as well. And I feel this is something that really deserves our attention. And with the recent collapse of the Bangladeshi government, these Bangladeshi refugees will just be pouring in a much more higher volume. Now, recently, BSF just caught around 500 to 700 people, Bangladeshi refugees, trying to sneak their way into India, and they're currently at the border. Now, in a certain way, we should be sympathetic towards them as well. They are coming from a very tumultuous area, and there has been a lot of targeted violence towards Hindus as well as the Awami League supporters, because Awami League, the party of Sheikh Hasina, was quite an Indian sympathizing party. So that has been frowned upon in Bangladesh, and there has been a lot of violence which is targeted towards them. So it is a very bipartisan issue currently whether we should allow these people to come into our country and live as refugees or not. But if they cannot behave themselves, then what is the steps that we need to take? I feel this is a very important issue, and it will just become more and more important as time goes on, because we, as the citizens of the North Bengal area, which has been one of the most welcoming areas for refugees of Bangladesh, need to live with those consequences. The third topic and the third news story that I want to speak about is the recent proposal by Member of Parliament and leader of the BJP party in Bengal, Dr. Sukanta Majumdar, and Member of Parliament of the Darjeeling Hills, Mr. Raju Bishta. Their proposal is that the North Bengal area, essentially Gorkhaland, should be integrated into the Northeast Council. Now, this I feel is again a very bipartisan issue. There is a lot of hate, and not exactly hate, I would not term it as hate, but there is a lot of animosity between the Gorkha people and the Northeastern people. Now, as we spoke about in our previous episode, which I will be continuing in the next episode, there are a lot of Indian Gorkhas living in the Northeast region as well. And their history in that area is very diverse, is very long, and we are a part of the Northeast region essentially, because so many of our brothers and sisters live in those areas and have been living in those areas and have become essentially an integral part of those communities. But at the same time, we need to think about the individuality of our community as well. And I feel that the inclusion of this area into the Northeast Council may be a good step towards ultimately forming the Gorkhaland state. But at the same time, I think it could be a hindrance as well, because once we integrate into the Northeast Council, then the central government may look at it as a job done. And maybe once that integration takes place, I feel that the central government will feel like we have been satiated enough, and the Gorkhaland issue will then be even more difficult to bring up and even more difficult to fight towards. But at the same time, we need to look at the advantages of being integrated into the Northeast Council as well. It would mean a higher level of grants coming into these areas. It would mean a higher level of union sanctioned projects coming into our areas. It would mean a better infrastructure into these areas, as the central government would essentially be granting these projects and be overseeing these projects as well. And we have historically been aware that central government projects are much more, if not completely uncorrupt, but at least better than state sanctioned projects. So that would be a better step. But at the same time, we need to look at, do we want to be integrated into the Northeast Council? Now, most of the people I know, and I admit that I cannot really speak for every single citizen that lives in the Gorkhaland area, but most of the people I know don't really want to be integrated and don't really want to be associated even with the Northeast region. So I feel this is also, again, a very important step that has been taking place. Now, if senior members of the BJP party, the ruling party in the center, have been proposing this and have been actively fighting for it, it may as well become reality in the future months to come or in the future years to come. So are we prepared for that? Are we ready for that reality to take place? Or do we want a different place, a different reality to take place? Do we want these steps to be integrated? Do we want our community to be a part of this larger community? Or do we want to remain separate, maybe live still under Bengal and still have a fighting chance with Gorkhaland? So, of course, the time is ticking. The steps have already been taken. If we want to fight against it, now is the time. We cannot let this piece of information and this very important legislation to just go right under our noses and just be lapped at our faces and then react. A very similar situation happened during the integration of the Bengali language into our curriculum as well. The steps had been taking place for a long time, almost for 8 months prior to when we actually started our reaction. So we cannot let that same mistake happen again. The steps have already been taken place. What do we want to do? In Baithak today, I wanted to have a nice, relaxed discussion. I actually went back to the Darjeeling Hills recently and went back home, integrated with my people, saw the hills again, the beautiful hills, and it was a nice step back for me. It was a nice reaffirmation of all the goals I wanted to take and all the goals I wanted to achieve with this podcast as well. It was very nice to see the integration of my generation slowly into the bureaucracy. A lot of my friends are now into the law departments, are also into the business departments, are also into very bureaucratic roles, which was very nice to see my generation really stepping it up in those areas. And the thoughts that they had was very interesting to notice as well, because I wanted to see what is the generation thinking, what is our generation thinking about our community. Now, again, my foray back into the hills was not all roses and sunshine. I was also blatantly reminded of the infrastructural failures of my hill town, and in particular the drainage, in particular the waste management. While I was back in town, there was a huge thunderstorm that raged on for almost 4 days, I believe, and the lights were out, the drainage was horrible, the roads had turned into rivers, and it was just blatantly there to see the infrastructural shortcomings of the area. And it just really brought into focus what we really need to achieve. I think the main first priority is going to be infrastructural development in the hills. Without infrastructural development, there is nothing that we can achieve. There cannot be a business revolution without infrastructural development. People cannot live in a very comfortable way. We cannot raise the standard of living in the Darjeeling Hills if we do not have infrastructural development. And I think that needs to be the number one priority for all of us. In particular, I feel like the drainage needs to be really revamped. It needs to, the joras that were constructed, the natural joras that already exist, do serve their purpose and do have the capability to at least not cause the entire hills to go down in a landslide. But of course, they were not built for the population that we currently have. They were not built for the sustainability that we currently have, and there needs to be a huge revamp of the entire situation and a huge revamp of the entire process. Now, of course, 80 to 70% of this entire blame lies in the governments. They need to step up, they need to create these infrastructure, but at the same time, I think our people also have a certain responsibility to maybe stay within the municipality regulations while constructing buildings, while trying to expand our infrastructure, while we try to build new constructions. Let's try and stay within the municipality regulations. Let's not try to block drains. Let's not try to, encroach on property. And I know it's difficult. I myself have had a lot of issues with these, and the municipality itself is very corrupt, and it's very difficult to get proper laws passed, proper forms passed, proper allowances passed, and the bureaucracy, I know, is a nightmare in Darjeeling. But at the same time, we do have a civic responsibility to take care of it from our end as well. And of course, 60 to 70% of that responsibility lies within the municipality and the government to take care of it. Another important thing is the parking and the traffic. Parking and traffic has always been a big issue in Darjeeling. And I feel that the most conclusive and the most best solution that we can take towards it is to move Darjeeling's tourism from a quantity to a quality basis. Now, this is not going to be an overnight thing. This is going to be a very slow progress. And I think the steps and the foundations have already taken place. The hoteling and the hospitality business have already noticed this issue that Darjeeling can only hold so many tourists. So if you want to earn more, if you want to develop and earn more money in the hills, We need to move towards a higher, better class of tourists. Now, how will we achieve this? We can only achieve this by providing better services, by providing better hotels to stay in, by providing better restaurants to dine in, by basically improving that. But that itself is not going to be enough. Again, we always will fall back to our infrastructural capabilities. We need to have better roads, we need to have better drainage systems, we need to have proper infrastructure which can actually sustain this growth towards a more qualitative tourism industry rather than the quantitative tourism industry that we currently have. Other than that, waste collection and management, I believe, is slowly improving. There have been a marked increase in the quality of the waste collection and management, but it can obviously be much better than this. And I feel the best step that can be taken in this is privatization. As long as this is in the hands of the government, there's always going to be delays. Most of the people may have no, I don't know if this is an issue with only my area or with a lot of areas as well. The waste collection timings are haphazard to be and unreliable at the very least. Sometimes they come in the morning, sometimes they come in the evening. Even if they come in the evening, there isn't a fixed time in which they come. Even if they come, they just stay for 1 or 2 minutes, and if you miss that window, you're gone. And most of the people, they don't have the time or the energy or even the motivation to actually get into that place at that particular time and actually make sure that the waste is being collected. So then again, with the destruction of the waste collection bins and the waste collection garbage dumps, with the elimination of that, there is no proper place to just put it. So when you move across Darjeeling, when you roam around Darjeeling, you will just see huge bags just lying on the streets, which are not collected for days. Darjeeling stinks, especially during the rains when all of this garbage actually flows, and with the bad drainage system, it's just a colossal mess right now. But of course, there has been slow, marked developments, but of course, it can be much faster than that. It can be much better than that. There needs to be much better than that. It needs to be much faster than that. And development into this infrastructural development needs to be the number one priority before anything. So the next time you vote, the next time you vote for your municipal representative, the next time you vote for your local representative, make sure that they know that you need infrastructural development. Make sure that they know that the reason why you're voting for them is because they're going to get into these positions of power and represent your interests to create infrastructural development. Because that is the only way we can achieve this. As long as we're still fighting over identity politics, which is important, which I'm not saying is something that should not be discussed, or which I'm not saying is not important at the very moment, but as long as until we don't have infrastructural development, nothing can be achieved in the hills. So let's make sure that we do our part in this. And of course, 60 to 70% of the responsibility lies in the government, and only they can do the mega projects that will actually make the most difference. In addition to that, I would also like to state that it was very wonderful going back. On a lighter note, it was very wonderful to integrate back with my people, notice the cultural revolution that is taking place. I had the opportunity to visit during the month of Sawan, and that was a very wonderful experience for me as well, visiting Mahakal temple and seeing that long line of people and devotees just waiting for a turn to give their blessings and give their charako pani, whatever you want to call it in English, to the Shivling, the wonderful Shivling at Mahakal temple. That was a very beautiful sight to see. And it just brings back a renewed motivation in me. It just brings back a renewed affirmation to fight for this community, to fight tooth and nail and give my all to the betterment of this community. And I just hope that whatever I do makes a short difference, a small difference. And if I could just influence a few lives, and if I could just influence a few policies, my work here is done. Once again, I thank you all for listening and watching. Until the next episode, Godspeed.